All right, so I want to look at one of the most important things when it comes to getting like nice, clean brush strokes and having the right amount of paint on your brush. And that is offloading your brush. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So we've got our fresh paint colors in the small mixing wells. I always put my original colors in these small wells, and then we do the mixing in the larger ones. So I'm just going to show you, for example, I'm going to mix up a light green color here, and we're going to get just the right color that we want, but I'm not going to go right from mixing this color to going right and putting it onto the panel. And this is something that I feel like I probably should have kind of shown you the behind the scenes of a little bit sooner, because this is like really important. So right now, after mixing all of this paint, if you look closely at my brush, this paint is all the way up into the bristles of the brush. And that is not where we want it. So after we do the mixing, part of why I really like this particular palette is that it has a sharp edge along the edge of the mixing wells. And I use that to scrape this paint off of my brush. I scrape it off, and you can see it kind of runs back into the rest of the paint. And not only do I do that, but I also take my rag, I will wipe it off, so that I basically have a relatively clean brush. Then I come back and I just grab some of this paint at the tip of my brush. Do you see the difference? So now the paint is only at the tip. And that allows me to really control how much paint I'm using when it's not all jammed up into the bristles. And that will help me to come in to make a much cleaner line on my painting. So really be aware of that. And kind of along the same lines, after we've mixed this color, and let's say we want to go to a brand new color, we're going to wash off our brush. And actually, I should have wiped it on my rag first, because usually I wipe it on the rag and then I go into my water to wash it. We're going to wash it off really well. But I'm not going to take this wet brush and go start mixing a color, because what will happen is it's going to make my paint way too soupy. So I'm going to take my rag, squeeze all the water off out of it, reshape the brush. I'm constantly reshaping my brush in my rag as I am painting. And now I can go in and mix a new color. Let's say now we just want to mix a light yellow. So now we can go in with a clean brush that's not full of water. We can mix up our yellow. And before we put this color onto the surface, we're going to scrape it. Now, make sure that when you start doing this and your palette is getting more and more messy, you want to make sure that when you scrape it, you're doing it on a clean part of the palette, or at least where the paint is dry. I have a little bit of green right here on my palette, so I didn't want to scrape right there, because if I even barely touch this green to my yellow, it's going to contaminate it. So just kind of be aware of that, that when you're scraping it off, you're doing it on a clean part of the palette. You can wipe off the paint and then come back with just a little bit on the tip. This is also really helpful when you are doing your very wet mixes. So like in the beginning, when we do our wet wash of alizarin crimson and Payne's gray, I'm going to show you that. And we've got our paint very, very soupy. So let's make a soupy puddle. We're going to do our mixing first, get the color, and then I add a bunch of water to it. So you see how wet it is now? Now, I don't come in with this very wet puddle and start putting it on my panel, because the water would all drip down. So when we've got a really wet puddle, this is really important to offload, squeeze out the water, and then we can have a very soupy mixture, but if we only grab a little bit of it at the tip, we can use very watered down paint without running into the problem of dripping. I hear that a lot when I've had students come here to the studio to work on paintings. If for in-person workshops, they have said like, how do we keep it from running? And they have this problem where the paint's running down the panel. And that never really happens to me because I always just scrape off all that excess paint. And then I just use that very small amount at the tip. So offloading your brush, super important. Hopefully that is a helpful little trick for you.